Does this work? Oh, there it goes. Welcome to One City, One Book's evening with Heidi Durrow, author of The Girl Who Fell from the Sky. Before we get started, we would like to acknowledge that this event is being held on the traditional lands of the Chinook, Atfalati, and Malala peoples, and we pay our respect to elders both past and present. It is important to acknowledge the ancestors of this place and to recognize that we are here because of the violence and forced displacement perpetrated against them. We take this opportunity to thank and honor the original caretakers of this land, their lives, and their descendants. The One City, One Book project has been a collaboration between Oregon City Public Library and Clackamas Community College's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion initiatives. We're excited to have you here tonight and appreciate your support in our efforts to make our institution and community more connected. At CCC, we have enjoyed the opportunity to integrate the One City, One Book text into our coursework and activities at the college, and we look forward to continuing to participate in this project annually. This term, The Girl Who Fell from the Sky, was one of the readings I assigned in my Introduction to Women Writers class. In their discussions after reading it, the students in this class shared their surprise and frustration at, and also their connections with, the sometimes impossibly narrow paths Rachel has to walk around race, family, grief, and girlhood. They had in-depth conversations about why the multiple points of view are part of what keeps this narrative moving forward, and how important it is that Nella's entries are in diary form so we can see a path to not villainize her. They hunted for imagery of birds and flight and quoted parts of the book and back and forth to each other, highlighting the passages that affected them most deeply when reading it. Over and over again, the words powerful and connected appeared in their responses. The power of these characters and their voices on the page, the difficult situations, and the story as a whole, and the connection with the characters, most often Rachel, and these characters' fears, hopes, struggles, and lived moments. I want to highlight just a few quotes from students' discussions of the book. One student said, "The journal entries and seeing Nella's love for her children and her fear of them being viewed and judged by the color of their skin absolutely broke me down." And, same student, "I enjoy reading novels like this where it is not whitewashed and the story is seen from the eyes of a black girl and is also written by a black girl. I think it makes it 10 times more powerful and 10 times as heartbreaking when you realize all the racial slurs in the novel were not just put there for shock value, but that it is the reality every person of color has faced in their life at least once." And from a different student, "This story also really resonated with me in an emotional way. I have always felt very isolated in life, and a lot of the ways that Rachel expresses these feelings hit a very sensitive place within me. One great example was the quote, 'I will not be sad, I will be okay. Those promises become my layers, the middle that no one will touch.' Quotes like these made this novel so powerful for me, and I could not put it down." Like these students, I am glad to have had the opportunity to have read, discuss, and think about this book this term, and I too could not put it down. And with that, I'm going to pass this over to Greg Williams from the Oregon City Public Library.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Greg Williams. I'm the director of the Oregon City Public Library, and I am absolutely thrilled to welcome everyone here to the final event of our first ever One City, One Book program. I'm going to ask a question. It's a trick question. How many of you are regular users of your school or your public library? Raise your hands. Okay, you can all stay. Okay, thank you. Before we get started, I have some thank yous that I want to share with you. I want to thank our partners and sponsors who have helped make this program such a success. First, thank you to Clackamas Community College and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Resources Library Subcommittee for being such active and supportive partners for this program. Thank you to the Oregon City Library Foundation and the Friends of the Oregon City Public Library. Their generous financial support allowed the library to distribute hundreds of copies of this year's book and funded tonight's finale event. So very grateful for that support. And then finally, I need to thank our phenomenal Oregon City Public Library Adult Services staff for all their efforts to develop, implement, and coordinate our One City, One Book program. Please give a round of applause to Gina Bacon and Jennifer Giovanetti. Thank you. So I want to talk just a little bit about why the library was interested in doing a community-wide reading event in the first place, and I'd like to share 2 quotes with you. The first is from Nancy Pearl, superstar librarian and author. People can go for days at a time not talking to anyone outside their immediate family. There are precious few opportunities for people of different ethnic backgrounds, economic levels, or ages to sit down together and discuss ideas that are important to them. The second quote I'd like to share is from the late journalist Mary McCrory, who very quickly said, "The city that opens the same book closes it in greater harmony." And as librarians, that's what we want to promote. We want to promote not only literacy, not only provide access to a wide variety of information, but we want to build and nurture those close connections between community members. That's exactly what we hoped One City, One Book would do, facilitate a shared reading experience for everyone in the Oregon City Library service area, one which would not only celebrate reading, but would also prompt thoughtful conversations and discussions on important and perhaps even challenging topics. Now, in order to accomplish all that, it was really vital that we got the right book, and we couldn't have selected a better one than The Girl Who Fell from the Sky. It's marvelously written, memorable characters, wonderfully intersecting plot threads, and a captivating central mystery. And more importantly, it explores a variety of themes and issues, including race and identity, class, parenthood, love, family, coming of age, relationships, loneliness and isolation, and addiction, just to name a few. The book received writer Barbara Kingsolver's 2008 Penn Bellwether Prize for Literature of Social Change and has been the subject of several citywide reads, as well as campus-wide reads at high schools and colleges nationwide. And we are incredibly fortunate to have the novel's author, Heidi Durrow, here with us tonight. Heidi's going to give an author talk. After that, we'll open up the floor for some questions and answers. During the Q&A, our library staff will be able to pass mics so everybody can hear your questions. And I could share some biographical details with you about Heidi, but I think what I'd like to do is quote a couple of things she put on her website because they are so wonderfully written and I just have to share them. Heidi of herself says, "I am a product of a peripatetic upbringing and a child of 2 cultures and languages. I am the result of a love across color lines that was illegal in many states until 1967. I am a mixture of my father's ferocity and my mother's energy and creative spirit. I am constantly growing, ever changing, and always trying to learn. My identity is fluid. Today I am mixed, an African-American Dane. Tomorrow, well, you'll have to check in and see." Please give a warm welcome to Heidi Durrow.
Jamie thought Robbie was a bird flying down below his window. He had been waiting for this bird and ran downstairs without calling to his mother, "Going outside," which is what his mother had told him to say, even if she didn't hear him above the din of the television that played loudly in her room. Jamie knew that his mother was not watching television. She had a new friend in there. Jamie knew the television as something that made sounds to keep the sound out. He was okay with that. The bird he had waited for had come. Of course, it didn't have to be this one, but it was. There were any number of birds that didn't belong in the Chicago sky. There were 2 windows in his apartment. One faced the alley and the other the courtyard. Jamie didn't watch out the alley window anymore. The things that he'd see fly by were never birds, but garbage bags hurled out the window from higher floors. They sometimes struck the air conditioning units below, whoomp, sometimes catching there and rotting hot during the summer months. Jamie, who was really James, was named after his father, but not named Junior because he was really the 3rd. Jamie wanted a strong name like Steve or Brick. He had been Jamie since he was born, even though there was no way to confuse him with his father, James, a man he had met only in dreams. Jamie wanted a name with a different history. Jamie, who was really James, ran downstairs to find the bird, to identify it, to see it. He would remember what he saw. He would write it down. He would record the date on his life list, the name of another bird. In his hands, Jamie held a book. It was the only gift he had ever asked for, but the book was not a gift. His birthday, July 23rd, came and went with no celebration and no cake and no gift. Jamie got the book from the library. When the metal detector went off, he laid on the table a pocket knife he had found in the pants draped across the bathtub, the pants of his mother's new friend. "Young man," the stout lady library security guard said, "you know you ain't supposed to be carrying this kind of thing around." Jamie, who was really James, nodded. "I'm going to keep this here till you come back around with your mama. She says it's okay for you to have it." His plan worked. He left behind the pocket knife, but took with him the Peterson Field Guide to the Birds of Eastern and Central North America. He ran downstairs with the Peterson Field Guide. What is its shape? What shape are its wings? What shape is its bill? What shape is its tail? How does it behave? Does it climb trees? How does it fly? Jamie had memorized these questions from the field guide. He repeated them so much in his head, they seemed to have a melody. He knew the whole topography of a bird. His favorite part of the book was the beginning and the end. Not as if the book held a story, but he loved the two sets of pictures of the bird silhouettes. Number 13 was the magpie. 25, the meadowlark. 9, well, that was the mockingbird. And 14 was the nighthawk. He was certain the silhouette of the great egret had passed his courtyard window. He ran downstairs. One day he would leave this city and find more birds, Jamie thought, as he took the stairs 2 by 2 and then slid down the sticky banister on the last 3-step flight before the door. He would fill up his life list with birds he could name and call, and when he finally reached the courtyard, he saw that his bird was not a bird at all. His bird was a boy and a girl and a mother and a child. The mother, the girl, the child, they looked like they were sleeping, eyes closed, listless. The baby was still in her mother's arms, a gray, sticky porridge pouring from the underside of her head. The girl was heaped on top of the boy's body, a bloody, helpless pillow, and yet there was an old mattress, doughy from rain, just 10 feet from the bird boy's right arm, which was folded like a wing beneath him. Pain moved the boy's body. His bones jutted from his wrists. His eyes were wide open. He can see me, Jamie thought. The boy seemed to have landed feet first on the sodden cement courtyard filled with garbage bags, bursting with scent and refuse. The bones from the bottom of the boy's leg poked through his jeans at his thigh. He lay on the ground on his back as if he had fallen from a large, comfortable nest. It was not until the policeman came and raked through the courtyard's waste that Jamie could turn away. The policeman collected matchbooks, soda bottles, and empty brown paper bags, scraps of paper and other possible clues, a Jack of Clubs playing card lying on a brown-stained sheet, and a ticket from Saturday's Quick Pick Lotto. Jamie was still holding his Peterson Field Guide. He had no names for what he saw. Okay, we can all breathe now. So that's a little piece from near the beginning of the book. I don't know if you've all read it, but I won't give away any spoilers, but maybe you guys are allowed to. In any event, this is my book, The Girl Who Fell from the Sky. And tonight I wanted to share with you a little bit about the process of how I came to write the book and what inspired it, and then share with you a couple of more readings, excerpts from the book. And then we'll have 20 to 30 minutes at the end for your questions or comments or new ideas for me about this book, because I always find that I find new meanings in what I've written from readers who've read it and come at it from a different perspective. So my book, yay! It took me 12 years to write and publish this book. It was rejected by 48 different publishing houses. After many years of perseverance and persistence, I finally won a prize called the Penn Bellwether Prize. Now, the book then became like a baby of Barbara Kingsolver, the writer Barbara Kingsolver. She created the Penn Bellwether Prize, and she wanted to create an award that would allow for an unpublished manuscript to be published. So you get an award and a book contract. So I wanted to read to you what she actually says about the prize because, well, I mean, it's not just this cool little sticker that says winner. I mean, it could just be organic or free range or whatever it is, but there's actually meaning behind the prize. So I wanted to read to you what she says about this prize. She says, "Fiction has a unique capacity to bring difficult issues to a broad readership on a personal level, creating empathy in a reader's heart for the theoretical stranger. Its capacity for invoking moral and social responsibility is enormous. Throughout history, every movement toward a more peaceful and humane world has begun with those who imagine the possibilities. The Penn Bellwether Prize seeks to support the imagination of humane possibilities." So I really like that I got this prize because it's a cool prize to get. And also because it was created by this writer who I very much admire, Barbara Kingsolver, who wrote the Poisonwood Bible and the Lacuna and on and on. And I remember when I first got a chance to meet her, after I had won the prize, but my book had not come out yet, she was on book tour, on her own book tour, and she had said that she would have time to meet me before the event, and I should come up and tell the people who I was, and they would usher me to the green room where she was before she was reading and speaking. You can imagine I was enormously nervous about this. So when I went up to the woman who I was supposed to talk to, I told her who I was, and I was there to meet Barbara Kingsolver. I always use both names, of course, even though there was only really one Barbara there that night. And I remember asking the woman, could I go see her? And she responded with a very gruff voice, like, "No, she's busy." And I was scared of her in this moment because I thought, wow, her assistant person, the person on her team, is not very friendly. What if she's not very friendly? And I thought, that would be terrible because I love Barbara Kingsolver. Kind of like, when you read a book, you feel like you know the writer, and then the other part of that is that the writer knows you because they've written something that really touches your heart or gives words to the thing inside you didn't know there were words for. So I had really kind of given up all hope on feeling good about that evening and planned to go home and have French fries and lots of soda, I don't know, or something else. And I finally was ushered in to see Barbara, and I was really just a wreck of a person. And she turned around and she saw me and recognized me from a picture, and she says, "Heidi Durrow!" And she rushes over to me and hugs me so tight I can't breathe. And I'm sweating and I feel loved and I'm melting and I just am so happy, but I'm also freaking out and I'm thinking, just don't lick her face. Don't lick her face. I don't know where that came from. And then I didn't lick her face, so that was good. In any event, Barbara Kingsolver is a very lovely lady, and I was so excited that my book was finally going to be in this world with this great prize. So I start that way to say, yeah, it's really a book about ideas and protest and issues, but it's also not just an issue book. It's also a coming-of-age story, and I'd like to think it's also partly a love story and part mystery story. I hope it's some of those things for you as readers as well. The book itself is inspired by a newspaper story that I read many, many, many years ago, and I clipped it out and filed it away. At the time I clipped it out, there were a few articles about the incident that is similar to what happens in the book. And the questions that people were asking around this time were, well, how could we live in a world where something like this could happen? And they were asking more often, what kind of mother would do this kind of thing? I think those questions are valid, but I had other questions in mind. And one of the questions I had was, the girl survived. What does her survival look like? How do you experience a tragedy like that and let it be a bookmark inside you and continue on? What does her story look like going forward? So with absolutely no tools except for a yearning to maybe find the answers to these questions for myself, and very little information about this girl, I set out to give her a voice and a future that she wouldn't have in real life. So I knew 3 things about this girl. I knew her name and her age, and there was kind of a fuzzy photograph of her, but it didn't seem to be a recent photograph. And for years and years, yes, years and years, if you were one of the writers out there, it does take years and years, I struggled with trying to figure out what her story was, what she sounded like. I would go back to these 3 fact points that I had and try to write something, and it just sounded dull, melodramatic, horrible, boring. It was just really bad. It didn't have a heartbeat to it. It didn't have the heartbeat to it that I started the project with. So it did, again, it took me years and years and years. But finally, when I realized what I had to do was something very different than write her imagined future, I had to figure out what was it about her story, of all the stories in the entire world, why was I so drawn to that story? Now again, it took me many more years and therapy to figure out that maybe the reason I was so attracted to this story is that it was a story about a girl who grew up missing her mother. And I still have my mom. My mom was always there. But I felt like, in some very real sense, my own personal story was a story about growing up missing my mother because of our society's ideas about race and culture and beauty. So maybe some of you guys have guessed this, but like Rachel, I am half black and half Danish. I grew up mostly overseas in Germany and Turkey, and we spent summers in Denmark where my mother's family was. And when I was 11 years old, we moved to Portland, Oregon, and my parents split up, and we lived in a mostly African-American neighborhood. For the first time in my life, we had lived on military bases, so they were more integrated, at least at that point. And I experienced a bit of a culture shock because I was facing some of those same questions that Rachel faces in this book, where I was this new girl trying to figure out, what does this race thing mean? And when people say to me, what are you? What am I supposed to answer? So I wanted to read to you guys a little bit from the beginning of the book, because it sets up a lot of the questions that Rachel faces and a number of the questions that I faced growing up myself. And I wanted to read this to you also because I'm hoping you'll hear the characters the way I meant for you to hear them from the page, that inside your mind, the voice you're about to hear is exactly what you heard. Because I like to think of writing as kind of a musical score, that if you could actually get all of the right syllables and all of the right sounds in the right way, that we can tune into each other. So this is from the beginning of the book, from the point of view of Rachel. And I think the only thing, if you haven't read the book, that you should know is that Rachel uses the word mom in Danish, and it's pronounced mor. You my lucky piece, Grandma says. Grandma has walked me the half block from the hospital lobby to the bus stop. Her hand is wrapped around mine like a leash. It is fall, 1982, in Portland, and it is raining. Puddle water has splashed up on my new shoes. My girl in a new dress feeling has faded. My new girl feeling has disappeared. My hand is in Grandma's until she reaches into a black patent leather clutch for change. Well, aren't those the prettiest blue eyes on the prettiest little girl? The bus driver says as we climb aboard. The new girl feeling comes back and I smile. This my grandbaby. Come to live with me. Grandma can't lose Texas. Thank you, ma'am, I say. I mind my manners around strangers. Grandma is still a stranger to me. I know only a few things about Grandma. She's a gardener, she has soft hands, and she smells like lavender. For Christmas, Grandma always sent Robbie and me a card with a new $10 bill wrapped in aluminum foil. On the back of the envelope, where she pressed extra hard, there'd be a small smudge. The card smelled like the lavender lotion she uses to keep her hands soft. Grandma doesn't have a single wrinkle on her anywhere. She has eggplant brown skin, as smooth as a plate, all because of the lotion she sends for special from the South. They got better roots down there, better dirt for making a root strong. Her body is a bullet. She is thick and short. Her dark hair is pulled back and is covered by a plastic bonnet. Well, aren't you lucky to have a special grandma, the bus driver says. Pretty and lucky. This is the picture I want to remember. Grandma looks something like pride, like a whistle about to blow. Grandma puts the change in for my fare. She wipes the rain off my face. We almost home. When we find our seat, she says something more, but I cannot hear it. She is leaning across me like a seatbelt and speaks. In my diary, I write, this is day 2. Second day at Grandma's house. I wish I could go back home to before the summer in Chicago, back to base housing in Germany when there was me and Robbie and Moa and Pop and everything was okay. Even though there wouldn't be an Ariel, that would be okay too. Day 2 at Grandma's house, and Aunt Loretta makes pancakes special for me, even though she has no business in the kitchen. 2 pancakes and not enough syrup is what she gives me. Syrup that makes a stain in the pancake middle, gone so fast like the pancake is thirsty. I eat exactly what she gives me. Aunt Loretta eats only 1 pancake, and Grandma none because her teeth don't set right. There is something dangerous about pancakes because Grandma watches us eat. How you gonna catch a lizard with your backside loading you down? Grandma fusses at Aunt Loretta. I am smart and know that when she says lizard, she means husband. That is called learning the meaning from the context. Because Grandma says it, and she touches Aunt Loretta's face at the same time, that means she's talking about being pretty and being worth something and making it count. Aunt Loretta laughs, and so do I. They are happy that I am laughing. It's the first time as the new girl. I don't need a lizard, Mama. When Aunt Loretta says Mama, I think of saying more and how I don't get to say it anymore. I am caught in before and after time, last time things and firsts. Last time things make me sad, like the last time I called for more and used Danish sounds. I feel my middle fill up with sounds that no one else understands. Then they reach my throat. What if these sounds get stuck in me? I laugh harder, but the real laugh feels trapped inside too. School is not a first-time thing. I sit in the front where I always do. I sit quietly like I am supposed to do. I raise my hand before speaking and write my name in the top right-hand corner of the paper and the date, because this is what good students do. Mrs. Anderson is homeroom and language arts. She is a black woman. I think about this and don't know why. It is something I'm supposed to know but not think about. Mrs. Anderson is my first black woman teacher. It makes me go back in my mind. Mrs. Marshall, first grade, favorite. Mrs. Price, second grade, not so nice. Mrs. Mamiya, third grade, beautiful. Mrs. Breedlove, fourth grade, smart. Mr. Ingalls, fifth grade, bald and deep voice. I remember they are all white. There are 15 black people in the class and 7 white people, and there's me. There's another girl who sits in the back, who has hair like mine, my same color skin, and she counts as black. I don't understand how, but she seems to know. I see people 2 different ways now, people who look like me and people who don't look like me. Day 2 becomes day 3, and the next day and the next, and I count each day in my diary. Each day gets a new page. Grandma thinks I'm adjusting well. She says, I think you adjusting just fine. I want her to put S's on the ends of her words. and not say fixin' to when she's about to do something. The kids in school say that, and I know they're not as smart as me. There is a girl who wants to beat me up. She says, "You think you so cute." Her name is Tamika Washington. She says, "I'm fixing to kick your ass." Sometimes she pulls my hair. In gym class, she grabbed my 2 braids. I said, "Ouch," really loud, even though I didn't mean to, and Mrs. Carr heard. She said, "Tamika," and blew the whistle real loud, and Tamika said, "Miss K, I'm just playing with her, dang." When Mrs. Carr turned away again, that's when Tamika said it. "I'm fixing to kick your ass after school. You think you're so cute with that hair." I am light-skinned. That's what the other kids say. And I talk white. I think new things when they say this, like, there are a lot of important things I didn't know about. I think Moa didn't know either. They tell me it is bad to have ashy knees. They say, stay out of the rain so my hair doesn't go back. They say white people don't use wash rags, and I realize now, at Grandma's, I do. They have a language I don't know, but I understand. I learned that black people don't have blue eyes. I learned that I am black. I have blue eyes. I put all these new facts into the new girl. So I wanted to, I'm going to read just one more little excerpt from the book, and then we'll do Q&A. But I wanted to tell you a little bit of the experience of now having written the book. So the process to get to publication was a long one, and it ended up being very rewarding, but then it also became very scary. And I mention this because I had a chance not to attend, but to see all of the wonderful events that Gina and that team put together. There was a session about self-care. There was a session about adolescence and trauma. Another one about dealing with trauma, holistic ways to deal with it. Also one about bird watching, which I really appreciate. I could have been there for that as well. I actually don't know that much about bird watching. I'm obsessed by people who are obsessed by it. It's very attractive to me. In any event, when I first published the book, it was in 2010. The book's 10th birthday was actually last week. Yay! It's 10. It's double digits. And luckily, it's still finding readers like all of you, which has been very, very exciting. But I mention this because the very first book reading that I did for the book was actually before the book officially came out in January of 2010, in a little tiny town called Misty Valley, Vermont, I think it was. Way up there, lots of snow, and now I'm forgetting exactly. It was called Misty Valley. And I was invited to be one of 5 debut authors to come for the weekend, meet people in the town, do a reading, go cross-country skiing, which I'd never done, break bread. But it was kind of like this wonderful program you have in Oregon City where people get together and talk in the same language about one story. In that case, it was 5 different stories. I was not the youngest, but maybe because I was the shortest of the authors, I was chosen to go first, and we all read, each of the 5 of us read in a row, in the old stone church in Misty Valley. It seats probably a little more than this auditorium, maybe up to 300, and the pews were packed. It was full. It was January. I think it was 0 degrees at best, but people loved to come to this event. I was so nervous. My legs were actually shaking as I walked up steps just like this. Maybe I'm having like a post-trauma reaction to this now. And I stood at the podium and I thought to myself, okay, I just need to slow down and breathe. So I did that as long as I could without stalling too much. And as I looked out, the first thought in my head was, oh my God, they're all white people. And then I thought, they are never going to get this. I went ahead, nevertheless. I persisted, and the reading went very well. They sold out of my book. I met very lovely people. Some I continue to keep in touch with years later, one couple, I ended up being in touch with their granddaughter, even in Los Angeles later on, for a long time. And I mention this now because the power of the story is so great that you can dress a story up in race and culture and class and trauma and addiction, and someone still is going to be able to find their way in if you have told some kind of essential truth to them, or if you've offered words to them that they didn't have for themselves, even though it was something they were experiencing or feeling. So I particularly like this idea of the self-care kit workshop in this age that we're in now, where it feels like we have traumas every day in the news and everything feels very uncertain. Rachel deals with this on a much smaller scale, and she does have a coping mechanism. It's not necessarily something I would recommend, but I would recommend maybe finding an image in the same way that she does. So when she is frustrated, unable to deal with the next thing, unable to process the emotions that she's feeling, she says this. She says, when something starts to feel like hurt, I put it in this imaginary bottle inside me. It's blue glass with a cork stopper. My stomach tightens and my eyeballs get hot. I put all of that inside the bottle. I'm not saying that's a long-term coping strategy, but there is, I think, a way, even in today's troubled times, where we can compartmentalize some of the things and then continue to do art and connect and be in community with each other. At least that's what I'm counting on right now. So I wanted to read just one more excerpt from the book, and then we'll take questions and comments from all of you, because I would love to hear what you have to say. This also is what I call a Rachel chapter. And let me stop. I meant to say thank you to Gina and your team for the wonderful introductions tonight, for all of you participating in this amazing project of coming together, of actually reading the book and having these characters who I love in your imagination. And even if you don't like them, that's okay. Like, we could talk about that too. But let me just read one last small excerpt from the book, and then I'll open it up to all of you guys. There's nothing better than June because it's the end of the school year and there's nothing but summer for weeks, except first, it's race day. It's the end of the year Olympics and our class is Guam. Mrs. Anderson likes the way it sounds and all the other good countries are taken. I was the fastest girl in the fifth grade. That's when I ran faster than everyone except Eric Smith. The teachers called him Eric S. We called him Fast Eric. There was also Eric K with a K. We called him Smart Eric. Sometimes when I used to run, I would think I could beat anybody, even Eric S. Sometimes I didn't think at all, just ran, and it felt good. I don't know if I can beat anyone here. Today is race day, and Tamika Washington looks at me. She's been looking at me. That means she's looking at me now, and started a long time ago. But since I cut my hair, Tamika Washington don't be minding me no more. Aunt Loretta says Tamika is just jealous because her hair won't grow. But now my hair is shorter than Tamika's, and she calls me Afro Head because my hair curls all up any way it wants, and hers is straight and flat. I don't understand why Tamika is looking at me like that. Tamika gets the other girls to look at me like that too. She has lots of friends. I have one girlfriend and one boyfriend, but my friend is white and my boyfriend is secret. I have no black friends. Black girls don't seem to like me. Maybe there is something dangerous about me. Aunt Loretta says there isn't. Good students like me aren't always going to be popular with their peers. Those are her exact words. I want to be a good student. I know how to do that. I think being a good student will help me in the long run. I think of the long run the way that Aunt Loretta says it. Me running down the sidewalk past the old German dairy store and Emmanuel Hospital, across the Fremont Bridge and through the hills which must lead to somewhere. Aunt Loretta wishes she had thought about the long run, had studied more, gotten a better job, and a husband different than Uncle Nathan that wasn't so funny and didn't have a special kind of cancer just for men like him. You can get real sad later if you don't think about the long run like open arms that will hold you. The race starts. I run. I run faster than Tamika, and maybe I'm going as fast as Eric S. would. I run and run harder, and I cross the finish line first. The medal ceremony is in the middle of the football field so everyone can see. It is the student class president who gives me the blue ribbon and medal I will wear home that afternoon. I imagine how she will put the blue ribbon with the golden saucer-sized medallion around my neck, gently, gently, then smooth the front of my shirt with a long, soft stroke. She will take my hand and raise it in victory, and everyone will see that the beautiful Carmen is just like me. She is no longer one of the 15, and I will no longer count myself as one. These are the first words she says to me. Girl, you got them boys panting with your titties all hanging out like that. Don't try to steal my man with those. Tamika is second place and bends at the waist laughing. She is still bent over when I receive the smaller medallion. And then she gets a high five. I don't cry. I have the blue bottle. I make resolutions. I turn 12 next month. It's day 223. I'm the new girl. I must be the new girl. I will fill myself with the color blue. Thank you. So we are going to open it up for questions and comments, and I would love to have some of your insights. Also, if you are able to cast a possible movie adaptation, you have some cast ideas that might be in order soon, so let me know. I think, yes.
Oh, there you go. I'm going to crawl right over here. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Just wanted to say, great book.
Thank you.
And as a fellow military kid, I wish I had gotten this book when I was 12 and moving away from the military and retiring from it and wondering, what is this America? And, you know, it didn't come when I was 12. It came when I'm 20, and I'm glad that I have the book now. And do you have any like experiences of being a military kid? How did you, I guess, how were you able to write that?
Well, thank you so much for this question and being able to talk about that. Being in the military, I imagine, is supposed to be like a grown-up thing, but this was in the 1970s, 1960s and 70s, early 80s. My dad was in the military, in the Air Force, and he then suddenly retired, and then we were civilians. Because we had grown up mostly overseas, we'd always been Americans. So as you said, it was very confusing to then come to America and then not recognize what we need to be American, which was Star Trek, real hot dogs that weren't red. I'm going to give you a list of silly things if I keep going on, but it was very disorienting. So I'm glad you have the book now at 20 years old, even though you didn't have it at 12. But I think you asked, how was I able to write about these issues? I think Dorothy Allison says something like, the place where you have the greatest pain, that you have to write from that edge, because that's where the real story is. And I know that it took me so long to write the book because, one, I first didn't want to go to that edge, and then once I was there, that too was very disorienting, to start to have feelings and reflect stories that I remembered from my own growing up. And I guess the last thing I would say is, I don't know if you have siblings or know other people who are now suddenly civilians and Americans, I guess. And if you don't have that, that's probably a good thing. But if you do have that, what I want to suggest is that you hold on to your own stories and trust in the truth of them. I think a lot of what stopped me from writing anything about my life, my experience of race, of growing up, being part of the military as a kid, was I didn't want the stories to be contested by my brothers. So that's why I killed them at the beginning of the book. Not really. I actually think neither one of them ever read the book, but they bought several copies. But the truth is, you get to tell that story, and it may be contested in the world, but all you get to do is to tell the story you know. And however specific it is, someone's going to find a way into it, and there's going to be someone like you who needs the book that you need to write. Sooner rather than later. Yes.
Hi.
Hello. Great book, first of all.
Thank you.
And what kept you, I guess, motivated or going when publishers weren't accepting the book? And I'm sure you had like your own self-doubt or whatever. But what kept you motivated or kept you going to write and finish the book?
It's a really good question, because there were a lot of times I didn't see how it was ever going to happen. So I think my first answer would be that I always wanted to be a writer. And it was from a very young age. You know, I was one of those bookish kids who wanted to get all of the books from the Scholastic catalog all the time. I wanted paper and pencils and stationery, and I would write letters, and I had pen pals from a show called The Big Blue Marble. I don't know if anyone can relate to that. And most of all, it was because when I was 7 years old, my mom, who had been a stay-at-home mom, finally didn't have kids at home. So all of the 3 kids were out of the house during the day. So she actually had mental space to do something other than house cleaning and caring for children. And she started taking different classes like ceramics and macrame. Do people know what that is anymore? I don't, okay. And so all of these kinds of things. But she was also taking a writing course. And I think her teacher, even though it was a children's book writing course that was like a correspondence course, her teacher had encouraged her to write an essay about the Danish word hygge. And you may have heard a lot about this lately. There are a lot of books about hygge, H-Y-G-G-E. It can't really be translated, but loosely it means cozy, but you can't be like you could be a hyggelig fellow. It doesn't mean you're a cozy person. It means you're nice to be around. It's like it's a state of being. It's like everything good, like candles and chocolate and puppies and like whatever makes you, yes, like that. And so my mom writes this essay, and she sends it off to American Dane magazine, and it's accepted. And she gets a check in the mail. I think it was for $10. Well, this is like 1976, so that's a chunk of change. And I remember she was holding it up like this in front of her, and my dad was taking a picture of her. So we're standing on the side with my dad, and she's like standing there, and it was like sunbeams were coming out of her. Like she was the sun and the stars, like she was so happy. And I mean, I didn't have the words then, but that moment has stayed with me. It was like I recognized that brought her joy, writing. And I was like, oh, I want that feeling. I want to be a writer. I want to be like my mom. So it was like a very early kernel. And then I had competing issues where I wanted to be safe, and I wanted to be secure, and I wanted to be financially okay. So I had a whole other track in life where I got really good grades and went to the best school I could go to, went to the best journalism school, and then went to the best law school. even though I was the first person in my family ever to go to college, going all the way back to Africa on my dad's side and all the way back to the Vikings on my mom's. In any event, so I felt like no one's going to listen to me because I don't have an MFA. I don't have real writing training. I started sending my work off. It was being rejected everywhere. I started to get disillusioned. But sometimes I would get a yes. So I'd get a yes from a writing residency, or I'd get a finalist in a writing contest. And so I decided those would be little signals. I got an agent in 2006, big-time agent. She represented Alice Walker and Anthony Doerr, Fannie Flagg, many more famous people than that, lots of Pulitzer Prize winners. And she was my agent, and for a year and a half, she sent my manuscript out to different editors who all roundly rejected it. So then I hadn't heard from her in about 4 months, and it's never good if you don't hear from your agent, just by the way. If there's good news, they're going to call you because they're making money off of it. So I finally called her, knowing that this was going to be the day I got bad news if she actually called back or picked up the phone. And indeed it was. She's like, I can't sell the book. Nobody wants it. I still want to work with you. Come back to me when you have something else. And I remember that day very well because I cried like someone had died. Because if I had the very best agent in New York and she couldn't sell it, how was it ever going to happen for me? And my husband, this lovely man in the front row, he just held me as I cried, and he said, sit down in your chair. So I sat down in my favorite chair, and he said, I'll be right back. And he came back with a tray, and he had champagne and strawberries and almonds. I'm not sure why that was the combination. And he put the tray down, he gave me a glass of champagne, and he sat down in the chair with me, and I was like, and now I'm giving myself away. This really happened. I sat down in the chair, and I said, I can't get rid of the sadness. And he said, that's okay, let's just keep it company, which is actually a line in the book. And remember that, you gotta remember the good stuff. And steal it before they do. I wrote the book before he did. And so there was that moment. And then the next day, I remember I got up and I thought, no, I don't just want a book. I have this vision that I want out in the world, and I'm going to make this happen. So I created a spreadsheet, and I wrote down all of the comments I'd gotten from the different editors, and I decided, is this actionable or not actionable? And some were not actionable. Like one editor wrote, this book is not funny. I am looking for funny books. And I was like, well, okay, you got me. And I'm not gonna figure that out, okay? But there were other things I could do, like make the transition of the grandma character something, whatever it was. And so I started to do that. And then I started to send out the work as short stories, chapters as short stories, kind of rewrote them so they would fit different awards and contests and literary journals. And I had a rule for myself at this point. For every rejection I got, I had to send the story out that same day to 2 more places. So I amassed a massive number of rejections, and very quickly too, because I was on this, on this jaunt of trying to get it out there. There was a woman I knew who was a salesperson, which is like not my way at all to operate in the world. And she said, you have to get 20 no's before you get a yes. So I was well on my way to that. And then things started to happen. I won a contest. I won a writing residency. I won a New York Foundation for the Arts grant. I went to Vegas with other people's money at that point. I did lose their money. It wasn't a lot. They thought I was a lucky charm at that point. And then I kept going. The Penn Bellwether Prize really did save everything for me because almost every single publisher had rejected the book. And if I hadn't received that prize, I don't know whether the book would have seen the light of day ever. But again, I guess the basic thing was I had to have this happen in the world. I had to get this book to you because you needed the book. That's what kept me going.
Thank you.
Are you writing?
I want to go into journalism, yeah.
Good. Keep going. I think I answered too long of a question, but My answer was too long for the question. Other questions, comments? Yes.
How you doing?
Hi.
I love the book also.
Thank you.
I have a question. The book. At
You
the
have
end-
it. You have sticky notes and flags in it. That's,
Yeah.
I want to see those notes.
Yeah, there's a lot in here. The book towards the end, it gave me such a feeling of hope and a better tomorrow and a shining sky almost. Cause the book almost felt cloudy. You know what I mean, all the way through. Because it's a sad book. It's a book about tragedy, and towards the end, like the sky opens up. So I want to ask you: is there hope in Brick's and Rachel's future?
That's such a good question. You know, it's ambiguous at the end, right? What's happening? What do you think?
I think it is. I think Brick is going to go home and meet his mother, help her get through whatever they get through. Rachel's going to be a great doctor.
Ooh.
A great doctor. She's going to get past the tragedy, with her family. She's going to meet her father again. And then Rachel and Brick going to meet each other again 10 years later and get married and have a family.
I love it. You know, I'm not working on a sequel, but I have thought about these characters a lot more. In particular, Brick, who I just love. He's actually not a real person or, constructed around one person I know. He's kind of every good man and young man I've known in my life as a composite. And especially as an African-American male character, it was really important for me to create someone like that in fiction. So when I was growing up, The Color Purple had just come out, the book, and it's probably not something you would know at this point, now some 25, 30 years later, but at the time, she was very, very strongly criticized for the portrayals of black male characters. And black male writers weighed in on this controversy too, like very negative commentary in that regard. And so it was important to me that I create an African-American male character who reflected the goodness that I knew of them. Now, there's also, Roger, who he got a lot of troubles and really disappoints in the end. But then you have this contrast in Brick, who is a composition of all of his hurts, but also all of his hope. And he is not scared of looking the way he does, and he still is able to open his arms to the world and welcome goodness into his experience, which is very exciting. So the answer is, I think there is hope for them, because how could she not be attracted? I don't know if it's sexually attractive or physically attractive, but I feel like they're still connected going forward, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you.
And this will be the last question because we're out of time.
Hello, welcome to Clackamas.
Thank you.
My colleagues and I, working on diversity, equity, inclusion here at Clackamas, spend time and effort to educate students and others about the racist history of the state of Oregon, and talking about Portland being the whitest city in America. And your old neighborhood in Northeast Portland has changed significantly.
Yeah, my mom still lives there,
Yeah.
and when I was growing up there, it was just called Dangerous, but now it's called the Alberta Arts District.
Yeah.
Right? I'd have to walk home from the number 15 bus. I would take classes at PCC Sylvania at night, and then during high school, and I would take the bus, the 15, or was it the 8? Now I can't remember, on 15. And I would have to walk in the middle of Alberta because it was too dangerous to walk on the sidewalks after 8 p.m. Anyway, sorry,
No, that's
I
quite all right.
digressed, but
No,
it's
and I
all
was at
dangerous.
Jefferson High School last week for a Negro Leagues baseball museum event, and
Oh, wow.
but had dinner at McMenamin's, and so the fact that I was at McMenamin's can also tell you about
Right.
gentrification,
Yeah.
perhaps. So I actually was really pleased that there was a book about race and ethnicity and identity that was focused in Portland. And so, sorry if I don't have a question, but I guess it's, do you have other stories or experiences from your time growing up here that you think also impacted the book?
Oh, wow, that's hard. I mean, probably all of it, all of the growing upness of it. The fact that my mom was a displaced homemaker. She had never had a job and didn't have a degree, and she was 35 years old taking care of 3 kids for the first time. But at that time, for whatever reason, Portland had some kind of initiative to help women in that situation buy their own homes. So my mom still lives in the same house and still owns it, and luckily she hasn't been run out. Although that would be a strange thing because she was the only white person within a 40-block radius of our house at the time. The crack epidemic was largely was devastating. It wasn't large. It was incredibly devastating to that neighborhood because it used to be real families, and the change in my world between 1980 and 1987 when I left for college was just so great. I mean, it just became scarier and scarier. And I remember at one point, all of the gang shootings that happened within a few blocks of my house. And within 2 blocks of my house was just, I thought, the worst one. It was a drive-by shooting, and the kid was on a bike and shot someone who was on the street. So growing up in that era of violence, and mostly I have to say, I would come home from college